Good evening, everyone, and thank you for making time to join us in this weekly mental health webinar. We are coming to you from the headquarters of Kenya Medical Association, and we are joined by friends of KMA, that is the Counselors and Psychologists Association of Kenya, and Chiromo Hospital Group as well. So we are doing this webinar ahead of tomorrow's World Mental Health Day that is commemorated every 10th day of October. And this year's theme is prioritizing mental health in the workspace. So as we prepare to observe the World Mental Health Day tomorrow, then we thought it would be best to bring to you this important discussion dubbed Addressing Bullying and Toxic Work Environments. And in this webinar, we will be talking about recognizing and addressing toxic behaviors in the healthcare space, and also talking about fostering healthier and supportive work environments for everybody in the work space and in the healthcare space. So this is just what is about to happen in the next few minutes, 90 minutes or so. So I will be introducing our speakers shortly. But before that, just to give a short snippet about why we chose this topic, and especially today, it's in the background of wanting to just bring to light bullying that has been happening, whether in a subtle manner or even outright bullying in the workspace, either from seniors to juniors, or even amongst peers. And we'd really want to delve into this. And also talk a bit about subtle harassment at work, which is actually a hidden threat to a healthy workspace. And in this case, subtle harassment refers to either indirect or passive forms of mistreatment, often hidden behind professionalism or even dark humor. And this is when a colleague or a senior would act in a way that would undermine or belittle someone without really crossing the illegal or disciplinary line. So you can't really go to your HR manager and pinpoint that this is exactly what they did, but you would definitely feel harassed in that way. And such actions, this subtle kind of harassment actually would most often be dismissed either as a misunderstanding, as a joke, or even quote unquote tough love. But of course, the effects of such kind of behavior are long lasting. And I'll give a few examples about subtle harassment, especially at the workplace. One would be just exclusion from certain opportunities where a certain team member or a peer or a colleague is repetitively left out of important meetings, important discussions, important projects without any explanation whatsoever. Another example would be constant micromanagement at the workplace, where there is just excessive scrutiny of an employee or a healthcare worker, and that would actually make the worker feel incompetent or sometimes even powerless and not significant at the workplace. Another example would be where you're given backhanded compliments and quote unquote bad joke. For example, you're given a comment like, you are surprisingly good for someone your age. You know, it's like because you're young, then we don't really expect you to do things this well. Or when we give you a hurtful comment, but it is put in a background of dark humor, disguised as a joke. That's also could be some subtle ways of harassment and bullying at the workplace. Another example would be outright undermining, where it's a form of questioning somebody's judgment, either in the call that they made or in the meeting that was held, or even just taking credit for their own ideas instead of giving credit to the person who actually birthed the idea. So these are just examples of subtle harassments that happen in the workplaces and could also be masking bullying with an undertone of undermining peers and even juniors at the workplace. The last example would definitely be having passive aggressive behavior, where you're outrightly either ignoring emails from your junior. For example, if you're a supervisor working on their dissertation or something, or you're just outrightly giving somebody silent treatment, and they really don't have a reason as to why they're doing what they're doing. And these are really types of subtle harassments that are actually dangerous to having a mental health workspace being prioritized. And so with that background introduction, I'd like to bring to you our first speaker of the evening. And this is Mr. Kimani Githongo. He is the chair of counselors and psychologists of Kenya. He is a counselor, a psychologist, a certified professional mediator, and he has done quite a bit. Oh, he's also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Mr. Kimani, I'm knowing this today. And he has been a practicing advocate since 1987, an appropriator at the Kimani Githongo and CO Advocates. He's also a practicing counselor and psychologist and also trainer. He is a certified professional mediator and trainer since 2016, and has been an editor at the Journal of Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association, an editor at the Journal of Philosophy and Culture, and a member of the Court Users Committee of the High Court of Kenya Family Division. He's also a member of various professional associations, such as a member of the Law Society of Kenya, a member of the International Commission of Jurists, a member of the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries of Kenya. He is a member of the Association of Counselors and Psychotherapists in Africa. He is a member of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association, KCPA. He is a member of the Counselors and Psychologists Society of Kenya. And also he's a member of the Regional Institute of Professional Mediators and is actually its current secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Mr. Kimani Githongo. You're free to go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ida, for your wonderful introduction of me, and it is a great pleasure for me to be among prominent members of this profession in the medical field, as well as knowing very well our collaboration between the counselors, psychologists, legal fraternity, and the medical field, because we all work together at one time or the other. And I'm delighted just to be presenting this particular topic, because it is very appropriate at this particular time when we will be celebrating our World Mental Health Day, as well as the recent events even in our own country, and also that a particular aspect which is rarely spoken about in terms of the bullying and having a toxic work environment. And I can assure you, it is not actually in the field of medical practice. It is in all of fields. I have had occasion to actually facilitate a CPD event for the Law Society of Kenya, and we are still talking about this particular topic, although we tilted it towards the work-life balance. And bullying and toxicity also come in there when somebody cannot be able to actually have a proper work-life balance. I am also delighted to be hosted by Dr. Ida and my co-presenter, Gathoni Bogwa, my colleague psychologist on the other side. It looks like it's a ladies' evening because I am one between the two. But they always say that Wednesday is a ladies' night. Therefore, I do believe we'll be treated to that ladies' night after this particular presentation. Dr. Ida, I think you'll be moderating us so that you may be able to tell me how many minutes I may have so that I don't eat into the other minutes for the other co-presenter, but allow me to just share my slides. And that is the topic that we are going to be addressing this particular evening, and that is bullying and the toxic work environments. And we may start off by looking at the introduction of workplace. And believe you me, Dr. Ida, you have actually taken part of the words that are going to be presented here. So in the event that we repeat the same words that you have used, please forgive us because you have also acted like a presenter as well, but that is what the moderator is supposed to do. So workplace bullying includes negative acts directed towards employees. Examples could include intimidating or undermining employees by demeaning their work standards, even that dry humor or negative humor, as Dr. Ida has said, not giving them a credit, or not setting up for failure, and constantly reminding them maybe of all the mistakes. And if we look at some of the identifying aspects or characteristics, you look at verbal abuse, exclusion or isolation, just like Dr. Ida has said, you may be excluded from an event and only your colleagues are considered for such kind of an event. People may not be talking to you, not because that you are the one causing that particular isolation, but they have taken it upon themselves to isolate you. A lot of gossip and rumors spreading within the workplace, threats of manipulation, sexual harassment. And toxic environments are characterized by poor communication, sometimes favoritism, high turnover, and absolute conflict. And we can look at some of the graphic illustrations there. You're looking at intimidation, belittling remarks, persistent criticism, inaccurate accusation, and public humiliation, bawling out, setting up to fail, and malicious rumor, and sometimes work overloading. Not that actually you may not be able to handle your work, but deliberately you are given that work, setting you up for failure. And you can have a small checklist about some of the things that happen at the workplace, and that would indicate that the workplace is actually very, very toxic, like poor communication. We have spoken about gossip and rumor around the office, high employee turnover rates, lack of work-life balance because maybe you want to leave and then that is the time that work is heaped onto you. Or like for the medical field, when you are working in terms of shifts, your colleagues just deliberately just fail to turn up at the appointed time. And therefore that would interfere with your work-life balance because you needed to be elsewhere. Dr. Ida has spoken about micromanagement, all right, and the favoritism by either the supervisors or other people. And the statistics that we have, and these are derived from a relatively advanced jurisdiction of place, which is Australia, where they have this act data. And this particular act, it is an office which has been set up by an act of Parliament that looks at the workplace situation. And in accordance with their data, they're talking about that the number of work-related harassment or workplace bullying, workers' compensation claims in the year 2017 to 2018, and again 2020 to 2021, the cases that had been reported were 200 1998, and the percentage was 66 of the accepted harassment or workplace bullying claims made by ladies or women within the same period. Further, statistics indicate at the national level, and this, as I said, is Australia, that there were 2,280 work-related harassment and or workplace bullying compensation claims between 2017 and 2018. And the median time away from the workplace due to that harassment or bullying within that same period was 14.8 weeks for these workers being absent of their workplace. And the frequency rates of workers' compensation claims for harassment or bullying made by female employees stood at 23.9, which were more than twice the rate of these claims made by males at 9.3 over those 3 years, 2016 to 2017, and again 2018 to 2019 combined. And according to this particular Australian data, it says that the industry groups with the highest frequency rates of work-related harassment or workplace bullying between the same period of 2016 to 2019 were to be found mainly in the public safety services, residential care services, civic care professionals where we fall in, whether it is in the medical field, legal field, counseling, psychology field, or any other professional field for that matter, and other interested group services. And as you can see, therefore, it is not restricted to only one particular sector, but it cuts right across all the areas within our work space. Where does that leave us when we are subjected to harassment, to toxicity or bullying at the workplace? This will result in harming the employee's well-being. There will be lowered morale or motivation at the workplace. Obviously, productivity will reduce. We'll have a talent drain because people will leave those particular employment environments where toxicity is, and this could end up destroying organizations on account of failure to address these particular toxic issues, bullying, among other type of harassment. And when we look at how we need to address these issues, we may need a multi-door approach, multi-structured approach that may involve all the stakeholders. And primarily, the basic stakeholders here, we're talking about the employers themselves, the employees themselves. We can also have some legal or regulatory framework that may enable us to actually address this particular monster of toxicity at the workplace and indeed bullying. These statistics are taken now again from Oak Engage. This is a UK organization. It talks about the effects of this toxicity or bullying and says it is 7% of employees agree that a toxic workplace culture has had a negative impact on their mental health. 73% of employees agree that a toxic workplace culture has contributed to their getting burnt out. And 71% of employees admitted that they are likely to work from home in order to avoid toxic office cultures. And thank God to COVID-19 era that made us to work from home. But you realize in the sector of medicine, sometimes you may not be able to work from home because you must report at the duty stations, which include hospitals, and you cannot perhaps have all the patients visit your house. And therefore, that is also a downward disadvantage that people can work from home. So these statistics may not have been taken primarily from a medical perspective. And lastly, 61% of employees have resigned from a job due to workplace culture issues. And this is a little bit a warning. And this study is just a very recent 2023 study that has been done. And the bottom line of it is that 75% of UK employees report experiencing a toxic workplace culture. UK and Australia are considered some of the very advanced jurisdictions within the Commonwealth. Kenya is also a member of the Commonwealth. Regrettably, we don't have these types of statistics. The only statistics we can gauge from maybe the cases that have been taken to the courts, the cases that have been taken to the REBA, because some of the cases that have been taken to the HR within the internal mechanisms of any organization may not end up at the end of the day being reported out there in the open. And also Kenya, we don't have a great culture of research and getting data or statistics. And if these two advanced jurisdictions can report a high percentage as high as 75, your guess is as good as mine as to what may constitute this toxic work environment and bullying within the Kenya environment. And this we encounter on a day-to-day basis. We even see it, whether it is on our TV screens, reports in the newspapers, or even hear people talking about the kind of frustrations they are going through their duties. Well, if we venture into the political space that we are in currently in our country, Kenya, then you can even realize that it is not very, very far-fetched. Consequently, we can only say if those jurisdictions are at 75, where are we at the Kenyan situation? We could be absolutely very high in those percentages. And therefore, we need to look at what I spoke about a little bit earlier on, the role of employers, the role of employees, the role of the law and the legal and statutory or regulatory framework, where we can be able to address this. And allow me to get back to Dr. Ida and to see whether this is a good space for me to take a break and allow my co-presenter to come in, but I'm in your hands, Dr. Ida.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Advocate Kimani, for that amazing introduction. At this juncture, I want to also introduce you, our co-speaker, guest speaker, Madam Gathoni Mbogwa, and I will read her profile just so that we all know that we are listening to people who are actually experts and have put in a lot of work to be where they are right now. So she is a senior clinical psychologist with holding a master's of clinical psychology, has an advanced diploma in mental health clinical practice, and with over a decade of experience in the field of psychology. She is passionate she's passionate about wellness, mental health innovation, mindset coaching, and trauma-focused therapy. She holds the position of clinical psychologist in charge at the AAR Hospital, and she is a clinical psychologist and digital relations manager at the Chiromo Hospital Group. She continues with her passion on advocacy and creating an awareness on various mental health issues through social media and also tailor-made corporate talks in various organizations and also on mainstream media. She is a member of certain professional organizations such as Counseling and Psychology Board, the Clinical Psychologists Association of Kenya, the International Society of Substance Use Prevention and Treatment Professional Board as well. As for her professional experience, she has previously worked as a clinical manager at CareTech Medical Center, also at the Kiambu Hospital Psychiatric Clinic, and also at KEMRI as a clinical counselor. Her interests are majorly on mentorship, writing, and corporate training for homogeneous groups such as HRs, senior management, C-suite, mental health champions, public service, students, and the youth as well. Let's all make welcome Madam Gathoni Mbogwa, senior clinical psychologist and co-presenter, guest speaker for this evening. Madam Gathoni, you
Dr.
can take it
Ida,
away.
thank you so much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Dr. Githongo. It's such an honor to co-present with you today. First of all, ahead of tomorrow, I would like to wish all of you a happy World Mental Health Day tomorrow. So allow me to present. I will go through the presentation as fast as I can so that we can leave some time for a Q&A. So I hope you can, are you able to see that?
Not yet. Yes. Yes, we can.
Right.
If you could put it on slideshow, please. Excellent, excellent. The slides are moving.
Right. Yes. So I felt that it would be so important to just start today by taking maybe around 10 seconds of our time in memory of all the clinicians that we have lost. I'm not saying that it's necessarily directly connected to workplace. However, I still feel that it's important. So let's do that for 10 seconds, please. Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin today's presentation by reading this to you. When a workplace becomes toxic, its poison spreads beyond its walls and into the lives of its workers and their families. One thing that I always emphasize on a lot is that work is actually one of the environments, actually one of the only environments where you spend more time than you do your partner, your children, or even where you come from. So you can imagine if this is an environment that ideally, quote unquote, in a 24-hour span, you're supposed to spend 8 hours, a third of your time. And I don't know whether it's an issue of Kenyans or Africans, but generally you'll find that we are not even spending a third. It's probably around 3/4. If you're not at work, then you are on your way home, still making work phone calls. You're in your house, still addressing work issues. So then if you find yourself in an environment that is highly unhealthy, in an environment that is full of bullying and toxicity, this is absolutely going to be detrimental to your mental health. So when we look at this, we can see that about 20% of individuals are going to experience mental health issues at some point in their life. One of the things that I've seen in black and white, especially over the last 4 years when I moved to AR hospital, is the number of people who come in through the outpatient department, observably very sick. But when tests are conducted, there is nothing. And when you dig deep, you actually begin to realize this is actually something to do with their work environment. Either it's burnout or the stress they're experiencing or the harassment they're experiencing, because the body is an alarm system, as we know it. So ideally, the hospital is a first place where somebody will report. And that's what we also casually, but we should take it seriously, call as hapa na kule. So today it's a headache, the next day it's a backache, you're not sleeping. Some of those just vegetative symptoms are really some of the key points that we always need to watch out for when we are trying to do a self-evaluation in terms of how we are doing. So when you look at the WHO, it actually estimates that anxiety and depression, it costs the global economy. You can be able to see that, right? It really costs a lot in terms of people becoming unwell and people becoming unhealthy. All right, 82% of workers with a diagnosed mental illness do not inform their workplace managers about their condition. So you'll find even the clinicians or even the people in the work environment, when they begin to actually become unwell, if they do get a diagnosis, this is something that is not going to be reported. So even as much as we are a group of people who are informed here tonight, you'll find that there's still a lot of stigma when it comes to truly talking about health, when it truly comes to talking about the weight in which work would take a toll on us. I've gone to various hospitals when you're doing rounds or seeing patients. And I remember there's a time I was telling one of the nurse practitioners, I left you here yesterday night and I found you here. Like, did you sleep here? And whereas we bantered a little and made a joke, these are actually some of the things that are becoming very, very strenuous. We also see that employees experiencing mental health issues, they become less productive. And studies actually suggest that reduction goes as much as 35%. And we are saying that if we are able to invest, the return on investment, the ROI can be up to $4 for every $1 spent on mental health treatment. But like Daktari has said ahead of me, we don't have very, very good data when it comes to our country in terms of really looking at mental health or generally the impact that work toxicity has in the workplace. I can't have this conversation without delving a little bit deep, because I want to bring our attention to something. So when we are looking at generally what mental health is, we are saying that for somebody to be deemed as being able to be mentally well, they should be able to cope with daily life stressors. So if your daily life stressors are work stressors, where you're spending almost 3/4% of your time, then definitely you're going to have issues. We are talking about this individual being able to realize their ability. We are talking about this individual being able to be fruitful and productive, okay? Learn well, work well, and also contribute towards the community. So if we are saying that being fruitful and productive, being able to learn well and work well is a key point of mental health, and that again is quite unhealthy, you are definitely going to start suffering poor mental health. And when that is not addressed, then it begins to symptomatically develop or rather trigger other underlying issues that an individual could have. Not to mention this thing that we say being able to contribute to their community. How is that going to happen for an individual who is working shift 36 hours? Okay, so then ideally this person also, they're not just getting the work burnout or the toxicity or the bullying, they also become completely isolated. Yet we know as human beings, for us to be able to thrive, we also need to be able to coexist well within the community. So we have to also begin to look at mental health generally, not just single aspects here and there, because this is absolutely what influences our thoughts, perceptions, and behavior. Allow me to go to, because some of these things Dr. Githongo has talked about, I wanted to look directly into some of the questions that we usually ask ourselves, like how would you be able to differentiate between, is this actually some form of real toxicity, or is this just generally work pressure? Because when we enter into work environment and find some of those seniors or bosses that are very harsh, there's always the notion that is passed, no, this person is pushing you. They are pushing you because they can see potential. In fact, that's the thing that is always saying, they can see potential in you and they want you to be the best. One day you will look back and you will be able to thank this person and this person, or even this environment that you are in. So let's be able to distinguish that very, very clearly. Number one, when we are looking at bullying, the motives are usually very, very negative. You want to humiliate that person, you want to control that person, and this actually goes into personal attacks. So if you're in this conversation today and you're trying to figure out that situation, including yourself, because some of you in this conversation are also in those positions of power. What is actually the intention of giving this feedback, or how you're treating the people around you? Because when you look at general work pressure, it's usually driven by constructive feedback. Okay, we are talking about performance reviews, and we are talking about personal development. So in no way is there no intention to humiliate, control, or attack that person. The other key thing we need to look into is communication. Okay, because how are you able to communicate? What is your tone? I like to always say, and I always ask my clients this: are you a kind person? And usually the response will be like, yeah, I think I'm a kind person. And I usually ask them, why do you think you're a kind person? And somebody will give me examples. I show up for other people. When somebody is going through something terrible, I encourage them. I talk to them nicely. So communication is key, because the tone, the rate, the pressure will be able to determine whether that message that you intend to pass is actually going to be constructive or humiliating. Another thing is about trying to turn people against the others. So whether it's peers, or even, unfortunately, some people in leadership position begin to engage in a lot of gossip, because you're trying to exclude that person. You're trying to buy other people to be on your side, or to show them how the other person is so bad. So if you're already doing that, then that is outrightly bullying. Because constructive feedback, if it's just general pressure, you are actually looking for ways in which you can help the people around you to improve. So you're not just pinpointing the issues and leaving your hands up and letting them go. You're actually trying to figure out solutions with them and trying to help them build their confidence, and teaching them, literally being able to handhold them. When we go into the leadership style, another key thing that we need to look at is their fear. Are the people in that organization, in that department, are they operating based on fear and intimidation? Because if the leadership style is a very, very dictatorial, then you'll find that it begins with compliance. So you just want to do, but eventually you actually just begin to do things out of fear. And in those instances, people are not even able to grow or even think about outside the box, or even able to be themselves in that work environment. But if it's just pressure, the pressure for work, because you have to meet targets and everything, that one comes with clear guidance. It comes with support. You're not just complaining when mistakes happen. You're actually able to guide people or individuals through that support. When we're looking at bullying, the last thing, you're trying to stifle personal development. So you'll find that on an organization, a department is not able to, or they don't want to outrightly support people to be the best version of themselves, to either study, to either take courses. There is no support. There is no leave. Yeah. And when that happens, then somebody is actually not able to develop themselves, because we do forget that if somebody develops themselves within that organization, they could actually be able to be in a position to bring more in that organization rather than take away from it. So if it's just a work environment that has pressure, and it's good pressure, or rather it's normal pressure, then there is a form of a growth mindset. Okay, we are focused on more of excellent. All right. So these are also definitely more examples of workplace bullying. We've talked about exclusions, but another thing would be self-accusations and sabotage. You'll find that you want to do something, but people are going to do everything in their power to sabotage, not support, not be able to offer ideas, because they are looking at it not as we are all working for an organization and bettering ourselves in the process. They are looking at it in terms of competition. I don't want you to shine better than I do. And that kind of unhealthy competition is very, very demoralizing. Withholding necessary resources, being put down all the time, or even being given unreasonable work demands. So you'll do this and do this and do this. Ideally, bullying starts, or toxic culture, it starts in small, subtle ways. And if somebody doesn't have boundaries before they realize, it's already too late. So it starts with statements like, we can really count on this person. It starts with things like, oh, this person is very, very dependable. Even if you call them in the middle of the night, they'll be able to show up. So it feels almost like a compliment at that point. And especially when somebody is young, and especially when somebody is new in an organization, of course, you want to take the best version of yourself in that place. But I'm calling upon all of us to always try and evaluate in terms of, if I start accepting these calls in the middle of the night, if I start accepting all these work demands, what impact will it have in the long run? Because when you do that, the time that you will either get a burnout, or the time that you don't want to confront, or the time that you don't want to stand up for yourself or even say no, then that's the time that you're going to see a lot of retaliation at that particular point. So everybody would have forgotten you are actually doing more than you are supposed to do. So now the entitlement also checks in, which unfortunately is very, very unfortunate. So when you look at the impact, this is from the Workplace Bullying Institute, you'd find that 80% of those individuals will actually be full of anxiety. So you're working based on anxiety. And a lot of absenteeism begins to happen because you also begin to get symptomatically what we said, the Hapanakule syndrome, or rather you're not just able to be the best version of yourself. Panic attacks, actually people do end up getting PTSD from seriously toxic work environment, or even worsened symptoms of already existing depressive symptoms. And toxic, when you're looking at the causes, it's usually at these levels. I want us to know that toxicity and bullying, it's not just vertical. It can also be diagonal, and it can also be like from down to up. It's not just from top to bottom. So things that would make people or organizations get into this space is, number one, there are no clear outlined core values for an organization, or even if they are just there, but not really practiced. So the other thing would be, we need to get to the bottom of looking, what are the guiding principles of these organizations? What are those values? And for you to always ask yourself, this job that I'm getting into, this place that I'm into, does it align? Does it align with me as an individual? Because if it doesn't, eventually, even if you started to do that because you had no option, and of course you had to start working you had to get the experience, or you need the resources, eventually it's going to be detrimental to your mental health. The other thing that is a big issue in organization is the notion that this is how things have been. I have had people come into organizations, and especially probably the much younger people. I think they're more outspoken than most of us, to be honest. And when they try to raise their voice or set boundaries, they're always met with, no, this is how things usually go here. Yeah. When you enter this place, this is how things are. And that kind of stifles their voice, which contributes to just continuing with the toxic behavior rather than questioning with the toxic behaviors. So managers with bad relationship qualities and biases do not provide feedback, or feedback is only provided when a mistake has been done, not before. And there's definitely a lot of emphasis on output and not necessarily the people. Remember, it is the people that build the organization. If you don't have people, you can be the best king. But if you don't have an army with you, and a good army, then you can't actually be able to go to war. Even if you go to war, you can't be able to win. So we always have to remember that it is the people. Remind yourself in terms of value. I think it's very easy that when you're in a toxic environment, you get so paralyzed because of the question of, what will I do? How can I leave such a big organization? What will people say? Where next? But it is you. You are the value in that space, and you need to begin to look at yourself from that space. And as we go into how can you take care of that from an individual space, these are some of the warning signs of a toxic work environment that have also been talked about. There's a lot of tension. There's low morale when you look at the people. There is no communication. The absenteeism is definitely there. A lot of negativity. In fact, you can enter an organization and all you hear is just people complaining over and over and over. And that can actually be dampen even the mood of the people who have just come in. Turnover rates. There is no way for people to be able to balance because of the workload that they have, and also being given expectations that are unrealistic. Allow me to look into two more things, okay? Is it possible to actually confront behavior? And I want to acknowledge that I think theoretically, it's easier said than done. And the reason why I say that, it's because a lot of time you'll find that you can play a whole conversation in your mind. You know, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. But I think it takes practice and it takes confidence for you to actually get to that place where you can be able to confront bad behavior, especially within the work environment. But let's look at some of the few. If it's a senior, one of the best ways, and as clinicians, we all know, and we say this out loud, that if it's not documented, then it's going to be a very hard conversation to have in terms of whether you did it or not. So please, if you are in a space where there's sexual harassment happening, if there's you're in a space that is so toxic, there's bullying, try as much as possible to actually document that. Where did it happen? When did it happen? Were there people around you who was present? Okay. And even as you get to a space of trying to verbalize that, be as calm as possible. Remember, when you're having a conversation or an engagement with a senior and you become emotionally driven, it will always look like it is your fault. It will always look like you're the bad one, because the concept is when somebody comes and pinches you, and then you're the one who reacts and starts shouting, you know, why did you do this to me? Everybody who is observing will not see the person who came to pinch you in secret. They will only just find you in your reactive space. So being very, very calm and using language that is respectful and very neutral. When it comes to the people who are at your level. And remember, these are just key pointers. All environments are very different and situations are very different. So when you're looking at peers, try and see how can you address this situation. And the best possible way to do this is in public, because in private. Try and see, can you have that conversation with that person in private? If you can't talk to them, why don't you just send a message? I didn't like how you spoke to me. Because when you bring to their attention their behavior, then probably some of them also did it unconsciously. So public conversations, public confrontations usually just encourage a lot of escalation in terms of the situation that you are trying to address in the first place, and setting boundaries. And remember, I said that boundaries can only be set to begin with. When you try to set boundaries somewhere halfway, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much harder. So three key things that we are going to look at is, number one, trying to evaluate your situation. Number two, we are going to, it's self-care. And number three is seeking support. So when you are in a space where you are being bullied, you actually need to get to a space where you need to make a hard decision. Number one, what is happening? Is it within your control or it is out of your control? Some issues I do acknowledge that could be systemic issues. Yeah, for example, let's say issues of payment, and they're at a government level. So some of those issues are systemic and they could be out of your control, but you can try and figure out what can you be able to do? Do you need to report? Do you need, what can you and your peers be able to do to change that? And remember, some of that change might not directly be for you. It might be for the people who will come years later, okay? So what is it that, whatever it is you're experiencing, if it is out of your control, then it becomes harder for you to influence it directly, or even for you to change it immediately. But if it is within your control, then you need to get to a space where you action it, okay? And some of the things that are within your control are also the goals that you have, the boundaries that you're able to set, the tone of language that you use when you're speaking to yourself, what you decide to focus on. I'm going to give energy to this and not give energy to this. Or I have a challenge, how am I going to handle this challenge? That is absolutely within your control. The number two key things in terms of trying to cope and to deal with very toxic environment, very emotionally draining and emotionally exhausting, is to engage in self-care. This is the game changer. You have to take care of yourself holistically. And I like to say that you are made up of many different facets. So you're not just taking care of one area of your life. You're actually acknowledging that physically, what have I been doing? What have I been doing to take care of, that hardware part of you in terms of checkups, eating, physical activity? Yeah. So there are 8 types of self-care that we need to take seriously, because you need to pour into yourself holistically. And you'll find that when you do this, it actually begins to give you some form of cushioning and helps you to build resilience. And when you're able to build resilience, then it's much, much easier for you to bounce back from whatever it is that is likely to happen for you. And last but not least, we need to be okay with the fact that seeking help, professional help, it's okay. It's okay to actually acknowledge, you know what? No, I'm going down. I don't like who I am. I don't like how I feel. I don't like how this person makes me feel. This environment makes me feel. And because I'm still in this environment, I need to do something about it. I need to seek help, because if I don't seek help, I'm going to harm myself in terms of your mental health continuing to deteriorate. Okay, so seeking help is very, very important. And that can be a professional, that can be the peers around you, that can be trying to lean on your family, that can also be in the sense of beyond this environment, beyond this organization, what else can I be able to do. So allow me to end there and open this conversation to some questions that I can see on the chat box. And we can address what we can with Daktari.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Gathoni. Maybe before we go to the questions, we wanted to take a short detour into the legal interventions of addressing bullying in the workspace. And so I'd want to invite back Advocate Kimani Githongo to just take us through that short snippet, and then we will delve right into the questions. So for all our participants, I am encouraging you to use the question and answer, the Q&A chat box. You can either send your question anonymously, or if you don't mind us seeing that you're the one who has a question, then you would go right ahead. Otherwise, if you have any comment to contribute on the ongoing discussion, you may use your the chat box. So for the Q&A, if you have a question, use the Q&A. But if you just have a comment, then use the chat box. Over to you, Advocate Kimani. Are you ready?
Yes, madam. Let me get there. All right. Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Gathoni Bogua, for that insightful kind of presentation. Basically covering literally everywhere, but let me pick it up from where you left. That we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of all aspects that talk about the workplace. And seeking to take care of yourself may also involve some legal or regulatory framework that is available to all of us. And as a result of this one, and coming from the other profession, we got some various laws which talk about how you can approach support systems. We can trace our supreme law, that is the Constitution of Kenya, because it guarantees the right to dignity and fair labor practices. And as a result of that one, in terms of the harassment and whether it goes to the very, very severe consequences of being given verbal warnings and fair written warnings and fair disciplinary mechanisms all the way to suspension or dismissal, then you can approach the courts using the Constitution of Kenya, the Labor Relations Act, as well as the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which you are very much aware of, the Sexual Offences Act, when you're talking about issues to do with sexual harassment, and the Work Injury Benefits Act that talks about compensation for psychological consequences inflicted upon an employee as a result of a hostile work environment. Let us not also forget that you may also want to utilize the trade unions that we do have, and the unions that you do have, principally maybe the Kenya Medical and Dentist Union, then you can be able to approach it from that particular perspective. The other aspect could be what Madam Gathoni has said, documenting everything so that you are able to support your case. So however minor it is, if you think that it is going towards the era of being harassed at the workplace or being bullied, document everything, because even when you want to confront whether it is a senior or whether it is a peer or whether it is a junior, then you can actually be able to give your version of it supported by that particular documentation. And allow us perhaps to conclude this particular presentation and say, this is a picture from the internet, that we deserve at every workplace to feel safe. We deserve respect. We deserve not to be feel trapped in a toxic workplace. We deserve to have the confidence that all are accountable for their actions. We deserve to have our knowledge and expertise valued, and we deserve to be able to confront workplace bullying without fear of retribution. And therefore, let us say that we all must work collectively, whether we are the employees, whether we are in the leadership positions, whether it is the people's profession called the HR, also the legal representation, as well as that other regulatory framework to be found in the trade unions. And we follow all that is supposed to be there. Madam Gathoni Mbogo has spoken about the culture, and there are so many places that you go and yet we don't do it that way. What are you trying to prove to us or to show to us? And therefore, we can always reorganize our cultural perspectives of our work environments so that we can create safer and healthier work environments for the benefit of our workers. And that benefit will simply trickle down to the benefit and the profitability of our own organizations. So it is a concerted effort by all of us. Let me hand it over back to Dr. Ida so that we can go to the next session. Over to you, Dr. Ida. Thank you very much for listening to me. Asante.
Thank you, Advocate Kimani Githongo. Thank you, Madam Gathoni Mbogwa. We are right on time for our Q&A. Or maybe I should start with the chat. I saw a few comments in the chat box, so I think let me go there first and then we go to the Q&A. In the meantime, our panelists, you can check the Q&A, just go through the questions, start thinking about the answers as I read through what's been happening on the chat box. So somebody says that they have worked in 5 different organizations, majority being headed or chaired by women. And in their observation, they have come to notice that in these organizations that were headed by women, the likelihood of toxicity and bullying was more than in those organizations that were headed by men. So the question is, why is this so? So I think I'd want to give that to Madam Gathoni Mbogwa, since it is touching on women leadership. So please go right ahead.
Okay, Dr. Ida, I see what you did there. I'm tempted to answer this more research-driven than how things are on ground. First of all, I would say that I have not necessarily seen research that points to whether leadership is by men vis-a-vis by women in terms of toxicity and bullying. But Caleb, I have to acknowledge that this is your experience and this is what you have been through. And I'm sorry that you've had to go through these kind of situations. At the end of the day, bullying is usually more to do with that individual than it is to do with even the people around them. The only other thing that has been happening with the emergence of women coming into leadership is the comparison between men and women in the sense of women feeling that they have to do more in order to get the same level of respect, in order to be in those decision-making circles or in those decision-making tables, with the notion of, if I am more aggressive, if I'm more stern, if I'm more harsh, then I will be respected. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us women, we usually forget that you did get into that leadership position or that decision-making circle in the first place because of just the qualities that you have or bring to the table as a woman, and therefore you don't need to change that. I've met a lot of great women leaders who are excellent, but I have to acknowledge that, yeah, indeed, there are also some that are leading spaces that are very, very unhealthy. So bullying has more to do with internally the insecurities, the issues that person is dealing with at that particular moment or that phase of their life. So always remind yourself that it's really about them, how they feel, what is going on internally, than it is about you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madam Gathoni, for that response. Move on to another comment. Somebody says, in situations where you're being intimidated by your seniors, for example, consultants, during the medical internship year, what does one need to do for the sake of their mental health, especially when you have to be signed out of the rotation for you to acquire your practice license? Advocate Kimani, I'd want to bring you in for that one. So this is a scenario where this is an intern, just finished medical school. They have to do the compulsory internship year, and they are feeling intimidated by their seniors in the different rotation. So then what should they do for the sake of their mental health, especially when they must be signed out by the same person or senior who is intimidating and bullying them? Advocate Kimani?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ida, for that, and also for the person who has asked that particular question. And these sometimes do occur. And I will also tie it to what Madam Gathoni Mbogo has spoken a little bit earlier on. There is that particular kind of aggression. There is that particular kind of perspective that I have to affirm myself. I'm the senior, among very many other things. Let us not also forget the personalities of the individuals. Madam Gathoni Mbogo has said, yes, sometimes it is individualistic in nature. But then there are these people who may want to take advantage of the interns, the junior staff, among very many others. And what we normally do is that there is a particular concept called confrontation, but confronting it with a little bit of respect and dignity, because you can be able to let that particular person know that whatever is happening there, it is not okay. You have to be very, very tactful, because as I said earlier, Madam Gathoni Mbogo pointed out that you have to document. You just cannot go there and it is hot air. You must give specific instances, as well as ensuring that when you are addressing that particular issue, you are respectful, you are confident about what you're saying, and also focus on solutions. Focus on solutions that, yeah, sometimes we use the I statement. I don't like it when this happens and this happens. It is not good for me. And I would propose that we observe respect in this particular place, among very many other things. And Gathoni Mbogo spoke about boundaries. And that is exactly what should happen in that particular place. Let us not feel intimidated, because sometimes we feel intimidated and we can lose a job, or we can lose that internship, or we may never get that particular letter that signs me off from the internship as a result of keeping quiet. However, it has to be very tactful. It may be the only person you have at the workplace. It could be your senior. And we have also to get to deal with those personalities and temperaments. And so it is up to that particular intern or that particular person to get to know what is the right time for me to confront and how am I going to do that. If you have to be accompanied by another intern or another employee or something like that, we need to speak about it. But as we keep on saying, Madam Gathoni Mbogo has spoken about support, the support systems. Is it even your family? Is it therapists, or is it colleague workers that we can be able to engage as we try to confront this particular monster of a bully or somebody who is harassing you? So it is actually doable, and therefore we also need to have some little bit of consultation before you endeavor to go and confront. It is always nice to hear the views of others and get the best out of it. Back to you, Dr. Ida.
Thank you, Advocate Kimani, for that response. There's a comment here that says the person is just convinced that every employee in a hospital setting should be in therapy and practice acts of kindness amongst colleagues. Thank you so much for that comment. Another person says that they agree with that comment. Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Then there's a question here but I think it has been answered by Ms. Gathoni Mbugua on the chat box, so I think I will skip that. There are a bit of accolades, great presentation, good insight. Another person also agreeing that people would need to have therapy, especially those that work on the hospital setting. Somebody's asking for your contact, Advocate Kimani Githongo. So maybe as we go ahead, you can type on the chat box your email address, how they can reach you, and so on and so forth. Somebody else says, insightful presentation, thank you. Please talk about horizontal bullying. All right, so I think I'll give you, Advocate Kimani, talk about horizontal bullying.
Allow me to pass it on to Madam Gathoni Mbugua. She's the one who talked about horizontal, vertical.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't want to take the thunder from her.
All right.
No,
Okay.
I have to say that I would still want to hear your comments on that, but peer-to-peer bullying is actually more common than we would want to address. I think for me, one of the tactics that I've found to work is kind of introduce humor in it. So when you notice that this has happened today, it's happened tomorrow, you know, just kind of try to humor it in the sense of, you know, and nowadays you're usually on my case.
Madam Gathoni, we may have lost you for a few seconds there. We may have lost you. We may have lost you for 5 seconds.
A few seconds. I was just trying to say that try to kind of use humor to say whatever it is that you want to say in a subtle way, because then you bring it to that person's attention, but their behavior is unpleasant. The other thing I would say is that hold your anger. Because sometimes when somebody realizes that they keep triggering you and you keep reacting in a certain way, and this is just a bully by nature, then you're actually encouraging their behavior by reacting to them at the same time. So I would say it's a situation of trying to balance in terms of bringing this behavior to their attention, not reacting, but also being able to advocate for yourself. I always say there's nothing wrong with advocating for yourself, right? So if you're bringing this issue to the attention because you have to advocate for yourself, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And don't let anybody gaslight you into thinking that you are wrong for trying to advocate for yourself, especially if you used good language, if you are calm about it and polite about it in communication. However, always be ready, because human beings are the same. Every time you try to bring an issue, even sometimes in the most calm way, there could be a counter attack to it, but you have said what you have said and they can't unhear it. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Thank you, Madam Gathoni, for that. More accolades there, great presentations, good presentation there. Somebody is requesting for the slides to be sent to the emails. We shall do that using our Kenya Medical Association ICT personnel. So let me now jump to the Q&A question. I think we can see we have 11 questions. Question 1, kindly do touch on sexual harassment and assault in the workplace and how it relates to workplace bullying. And how is someone meant to report such a case, especially if it is their supervisor who's been implicated performing the sexual assault? So, Advocate, this is touching on the legal matters, so maybe you'd answer that question.
Thank you very much. Before I even go to the legal perspective, because that is the most extreme, if it is not resolved domestically, just like Gathoni Mbugua is saying, do not be afraid. Just look at the right time and the lighter space, whether alone or with somebody else, and therefore talk about that particular instance. What was it? You used a word which was sexually suggestive. You touched me inappropriately, or whatever it is, or you were staring at me or gazing at me. So have the evidence and confront it, and then don't leave it at that. Focus on a suggestion or a proposal that could actually change that particular situation. I wouldn't want you to do that again, and let us observe our boundaries. However, then if it becomes persistent, or if the person becomes rude in that, then you can escalate it. I do believe there are some reporting lines within every single organization. Some of them may not even have those reporting lines, especially when we are staff members like 3 or 4, or even 2 in an office. And that is when you let the person know that there are some regulations, there are some laws, there are some conditions that may warrant that particular person to escalate it to another particular level. And in this particular field of professionalism, we deal a lot with other professionals. We deal with lawyers, we deal with other medics, we deal with counselors and psychologists, and they can always be involved, and they can do a demand letter to that particular person to desist from those particular kind of actions. And also talk about this does not mean that the person wants to leave the employment. That is a cautionary statement, but also be ready that that particular action could lead to your dismissal, especially when we are talking about a supervisor or a senior person or the sole proprietor who has employed you. Therefore, be always worried about the consequences. But if you can confront it confidently and with a lot of respect and suggest a solution that will set boundaries, I do believe we can be able to overcome that one. But if it's in a large organization and that particular person persists, then we go the legal way. We don't have to go to court directly. You can just get a demand letter written, and then that particular kind of act may actually be, somebody can desist, or you escalate it to the HR. Over to you, Madam Dr. Ida.
Thank you, Advocate Kimani, for that response. There's somebody who's sharing that they once had a lucrative job, and which was actually accruing them very good money. But unfortunately, they were under a bad boss. They were constantly stressed. They were burnt out, and they also faced racism. So what they ended up doing was quitting the job. And so now the question is, were there other measures that they would have taken in that scenario to address the situation and perhaps still keep the job instead of outrightly just quitting? Madam Gathoni, I'd want to bring you in on that one.
I think this is also easier said than done, because I think sometimes how things are on the ground, those circumstances can force you into a corner, into making decisions that you would otherwise not have made. But one thing that I say 100%, if it costs you your mental health, then it's too expensive a price to pay. Because if you're getting to a point that you're grinding your cheeks, you're not sleeping, what will happen when you actually trigger a full-blown mental illness? You know, then you'd have to be living with a condition for the rest of your life, just because of that job or the salary that you had. So I don't think there's a right way or wrong way, because I also want to acknowledge that there are some people who are still in very toxic environments because they feel they can't leave, or they have not gotten somebody else, or they don't have any form of cushioning. For example, if you quit today, there are maybe loans or bills that you have to pay. So there are many other confounding factors that will culminate to the decision that you will make. However, you have to also consider your state of mind. You have to consider what costs am I paying for this. And if it's too high, sometimes it's okay. It's okay to actually leave. It's okay to start again. We are very resilient as human beings. We are actually very, very resilient, and we are able to bounce back. It might take a while, but we are actually able to bounce back. So I would say you made the right decision based on the circumstances that you had at that particular time, and you can work through or either recovering or healing from that, and then charting out a way, what can I still do in terms of progressively still focusing on growing and being the best version of myself and accomplishing the things that you wanted to accomplish for yourself in this life. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Dr. Ida, allow me to add to that.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And yes, mambo kwa ground in Mangumu. It's difficult sometimes, and we can talk about all these things. We can even supply you the slides. We may not be able to solve literally everything. Let us take every situation as it comes. However, like my son is a great football supporter of Liverpool, and he tells me that the clarion call of Liverpool at Anfield is, "You shall never walk alone." And therefore, even some of the mental health slogans is that it is okay to say you're not okay. And therefore, as you continue clenching your fists, grinding your teeth, having tightness of the chest in the night because of what you have been facing at the workplace, please don't walk alone. Don't walk alone. Seek support. Talk to your family. Yes, they'll tell you you're weak. They'll tell you vumilia. They'll tell you so many other things. But exhaust all the mechanisms that there can be. Is it a therapy? Is it seeking legal advice? Is it the union? Is it the HR? Is it colleague or workers? Try literally everything. However, Madam Gathoni Mbogwe says, you never die at that workplace. There's always an alternative, and we are resilient. Let me quote her words, that you can start all over again. However, before you get to that particular situation, please try literally everything. Don't walk alone. Walk with the others. And there are other people who can give you a different perspective. However annoyed you are, whatever migraine you are getting during that particular night, it can disappear by just telling you, no, it's okay, do this and the other. And it could take you to change yourself, and then you realize the work environment also changes. But those are what we call coping mechanisms, the positive coping mechanisms, which therapists or even good friends who maybe have been in the workplace longer can be able to impact on you. I just wanted to beef up what Madam was saying. Over to you, Dr. Ida.
Thank you, Advocate Kimani, for those responses, and thank you, Madam Gathoni, as well. Somebody is sharing a comment. They are anonymous, so I think I am safe to share. They say that they are in a new government institution and was once given a target by their direct supervisor. They only learned later that the same supervisor was sabotaging the meeting the targets that had been placed on them. And so also the idea of we don't do that here cropped up. And so they're just supporting that indeed bullying and toxicity is everywhere, including in government institutions. Thank you for that comment. Somebody else says, oh, there's a question. So what steps should one take for a toxic former employer that even though they ended up resigning, they still mess up with your new employer, rendering you jobless for good? So this is a scenario where they were employed in a certain organization. That employer was a toxic employer. That person quit and ended up going to a new organization only for that toxic former employer to still mess up whatever is happening in the new job. I can see Madam Gathoni Mbogo is typing something, so maybe I can give it to Advocate Kimani to answer that as we go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ida. Let us not shy away from calling out people, and especially those who are basically very evil, and they would want to follow you over and over again because maybe you did not yield to what they wanted. They may have wanted to misuse you, but you refused, and therefore they want to follow you to where you go. And in this particular land of ours, there are laws of defamation and laws of slander. And in particular, if you get to know, whether through telephone calls or written material, that this particular former employer is following you up with a new employer, then you can actually, again, I say, go to an advocate, a demand letter will be written, and if that does not exist, then you go to the court and sue this particular person for defaming you or basically maligning your name to the new employer. And that is what I'm saying. Let us not walk alone. Let us consult with every professional who can give you some little bit of support. Back to you, Dr. Ida.
Thank you for that. I'd like to read out this question because we have overemphasized on the supervisor. So maybe let's now hear from somebody who's a senior colleague, and they say, as a senior colleague, I'd like to ask a sensitive question. It seems to me that there's a fine line between constructive criticism and bullying of junior colleagues. However, they've noted that recently there has been a tendency for younger or junior colleagues in the profession to disdain well-deserved criticism and instead seem to want to be coddled. So in these situations, how should supervisors navigate the situation to ensure that the standards are maintained while avoiding bullying? That one, I really have to give it to Madam Gathoni to give a response to that, please. So this is actually from a senior colleague's perspective. They really want to know where is this fine line between constructive criticism and actual bullying of the junior colleagues in the profession. And then how then do you be able to navigate that situation to be able to correct, give criticism, to ensure that the medical standards of medical practice are actually maintained? Over to you, Madam Gathoni.
And also to welcome Dr. Githongo to comment on that as well. I think first of all, let's acknowledge that we are living in very, very different times. I think when I was an intern 10 years ago, the game was completely different, and we were taught to be resilient. We were taught to take it all, to break our backs, like it was really a different time. And therefore, the people who are from, I guess, that era are also finding it very hard to interact with the newer generation now that is maybe more outspoken or have more boundaries or would more often, speak their mind or even refuse to do things. So that can also come out, like this person, anataka kubembelezwa. And I've actually had a few people over and over say that, I'm not your parent, I'm not here to parent you. Maybe I'm your boss or I'm your supervisor. But for you to actually be able to be clean is to follow, just follow, or rather teach, give in terms of procedures, in terms of policies. This is how to do things. This is how, this is what you're going to follow. And if something is documented and clearly an individual is not following that, then you can actually just be able to give them feedback. And another way to protect yourself is also to give that feedback, maybe also in the presence of another person in a calm way, because that other person also acts as a witness in terms of what really happened in this case, or even just documenting in terms of sending an email or calling them to try and talk to them in a calm way, the two of you, without your emotions being heightened. However, I always want to say that sometimes if somebody is in a really bad space, no matter what you tell them, and they were already in a bad mental space, they are going to interpret it in a complete different way. And the best way you can do is just to try and put measures to protect yourself. But let's hear from, what are your thoughts around?
Advocate Kidongo? Advocate Kidongo, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think Madam Kidongo just wanted you to weigh in on that as we finish on that question. And then I'd also encourage both panelists to also type down the answers on the Q&A, just so that we are able to finish on time. So Advocate Kimani, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think Madam Guadoni has done a commendable response to that one. And allow me just to echo what she has said. That yes, we're in a new dispensation, absolutely. In terms of age gaps, generations, and even the temperaments that we have been looking at. And that does not mean that we excuse the junior people. And that also comes to mind what was asked a little bit earlier on, that the harassment does not need to be vertical. It can also be horizontal, such that the juniors can actually harass the supervisors. And we have been in that particular situation. It is also happening in our own houses, that we're also being harassed by our own children, okay, or other junior staff that we actually employ. But Madam Wadhoni Mbogo has insisted, what are the structures? What are the policies? What are the reporting lines? Do you operate something like an open door policy, such that if there is a junior staff who has come, has she or he been oriented properly in those policies, those structures, reporting lines, and literally everything else? And do you hold frequent meetings, briefings over and over again? And if you have to document that kind of a situation, is it an email that just goes directly to this particular person, or does it go under circulation? I am the supervisor, there's a GM, there is an MD, or it could be a very small office that literally everybody gets that particular email, so that you know this is not personal at all. It is not between you and I. It is all a matter of the office. And that will call to check the younger generation, the older generation, and literally everybody else. And you also copy it to the personal file so that they know it is going there, and it calls you out on the way that you are actually responding at this particular workplace towards literally everybody else. So that is how I would go about it, just ensuring that that particular person realizes that we are observing, and we are not really victimizing you. We are only here to correct you. But if people have to face disciplinary action, and even if they have not benefited from the employee-assisted programs, if discipline has to be given, eventually it has to be given. It may not be bullying. It may not be toxic work environment. It's just following the procedures of the workplace. So for managers, for general managers as well, for supervisors, they still have to adhere to the policies at a workplace. Back to you, Dr. Ida.
Thank you so much. We are having three more questions remaining. I'll request that we actually type the answers for them on the Q&A, just so that we can release people to start their Mazingira Day and World Mental Health day. But maybe let me take a last one. Somebody says that some bosses also live a lonely and isolated life, and they may also be facing bullies when they execute their mandate of disciplining staff, especially when they have to do the discipline. So then how do we support the seniors? Maybe I'd want to give it back to Advocate Kimani, because you touched about that discipline aspect. So then how do we actually support the seniors to also take care of their own mental health as they execute the mandate of disciplining staff, or taking a course of discipline where an employee or a junior is out of line?
We say that we observe the reporting lines, but vertically from down to below, we can still do that. And you can call meetings, regular meetings, just briefings to check on the staff. And this is the role of the management to ensure that everybody's mental health is taken care of. It is not only the junior staff we're talking about. We are talking about literally everybody else. And if you have policies that talk about that one, including paying for therapy sessions or boarding sessions or team building sessions, that is absolutely okay. So we are not talking basically about the junior staff. We're talking about literally everybody from the senior management to the lowest cadre in the employment. But let me also kick it to Madam Gathoni. She can be able to give us an insight on that.
No, I agree on that. I wouldn't want to add. However, there was a question that I would still want you to address, Daktari. It was in regards to, is there a statute of limitations? So somebody asked a question in regards to being bullied and harassed in the workplace, and then they leave. So is there a statute of limitations in terms of reporting, even if you left? So okay. I was there. I think we did a legal weighing into that, please.
Yes, in terms of slander, that is spoken words. When I abuse you, or when I say something derogatory about you, which you think is not okay, and you have evidence about it, and maybe you have a witness who can support that, that's 1 year. In the other one, written communication, that is defamation, then that is 3 years. Back to you, Madam Gathoni.
There was also another question in,
okay.
I'm a people's advocate as well. There was also another question in relation to, gosh, what did they say? Can I find it? In terms of, if we spoke about documentation. So somebody asked, what if you're documenting like in a journal? Can that be considered legally in terms of evidence that this has been happening to you? And sorry, Dr. Ida, I'm not taking over the moderation.
No, not a problem. Please go ahead.
Right, okay.
And you know, we are more in the field, and we encounter these questions on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, exactly. It is okay for us to respond to them. And yes, we said you cannot just go without any sort of evidence. You touched me inappropriately, you answered me rudely, or you did whatever. When was that? Where were we at? All right, and you're writing it down. You don't even have to have it typed. It is just an entry in your own exercise book or journal or whatever it is. That is what you form your backbone about that. Even if you have to go to an advocate, even if you have to go to court, that is what the same material that you be reproducing about it. And again, if you were to have a meeting with this particular senior or junior about that particular conduct, then you also document that we held a meeting on the 9th of October from 7 to 10 or whatever time it is. And this is what I presented, and this is what maybe we agreed, but it has not been followed. That is why I'm before an advocate or before court. Yes, wherever you store it, it is absolutely okay. Back to you, madam.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you for that. That was those were amazing responses. There's a comment here I'd want to read out. I I think it was piggy banking on the question on the fine line between constructive criticism versus bullying. And the writer says constructive criticism will focus on feedback and how to make changes, versus bullying, on the other hand, is a form of verbal abuse which is mean-spirited and offers nothing to solve any problem and does not offer any solutions for the situation. So thank you so much for that comment, Dr. Salwa. All right, last question here. What legal recourse is there for someone being bullied by managers and directors, including the HR officer? Consider most times the person is emotionally and financially frustrated and may not want a lengthy legal process adding on to their frustration. Advocate, you want to take that, please?
Yes, I can take that one. And it is a mixture of legal as well as regulatory, as well as the procedures at the workplace. It's a complete mix. You just don't jump to court. All right, court can also be very, very frustrating. And you know that the moment you take a colleague employee or your employer to court or your senior in court, you may lose your job. And therefore, can we be a little bit tactful in how we handle this particular situation? And that is why we said document it first. Bring it to the attention of this particular person. If you have to go with a colleague, it is absolutely okay, because the moment you go alone, there could be some heated exchange. But if you go with a colleague, maybe the tempers will go down. It is also a way of disarming the aggressor or the person who is giving you that particular kind of harassment, all right? And if all that fails, and you know, plan B is that if you took this particular person to an advocate or to court, you may lose your job, then please take into account all those particular consequences. But now we have what we call workplace mediation, all right? So you can actually seek out to your senior or your supervisor or your junior and call upon the management to mediate between you and the other person. And that will appear to be a more softer way than going to court. If the worst came to the worst, then you go to the court. So I am not advocating for the court being the first instance line of action. You try to talk to the person. If it is not possible, then do mediation at the workplace. If that fails, then you may go to the trade unions if you are a member of the union, or eventually you may go to court, but the court is the port of last call. Back to you, Dr. Ida.
Thank you very much, participants, for such an engaging session. Thank you for all your questions and comments as well. This has been an amazing evening to usher in this year's World Mental Health Day that we'll be commemorating tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Advocate Kimani Githongo. I have just known today you're an advocate of the High Court, but he's also the chair of Counselors and Psychologists of Kenya. And we also had Madame Gathoni Mbugua, a senior clinical psychologist, who is also the digital relations manager at Chiromo Hospital Group, and also the clinical psychologist in charge at AR Hospital. This has been brought to you by the Kenya Medical Association. We are happy that you would give time in the evening just to have this conversation with us. I'd also like to invite us to follow Kenya Medical Association on Facebook as Kenya Medical Association, Instagram at Kenya_Medics, Xspace at KenyaMedics_KMA, and on TikTok, Kenya Medical Association. If you'd like to reach out to our panelists we have had this evening, Mr. Kimani Githongo's email is kimanigithongo@gmail.com. Number is 0722-715-424. That is kimanigithongo@gmail.com. Telephone number is 0722-715-424. If you'd like to get in touch with clinical psychologist Gathoni Mbugua, her email address is gathoni.mbugua@gmail.com or m.gathoni@chiromohg.co.ke. Again, I will repeat, gathoni.mbugua@gmail.com or m.gathoni@chiromohg.co.ke. I think she also left her number, and her number is 0721 256 374. Once again, to reach out to Gathoni Mbogwa, call her on 0721 256 374. Otherwise, from me, I have been your moderator, Dr. Aida Wanjiko. I am actually the chair of the Physician Wellbeing Committee at the Kenya Medical Association. It has been a joy, pleasure, and honor to host you, Advocate Kemani Gedongo and Madam Gathoni Mbogwa. Thank you so much for sparing your time. And thank you to all the 258 participants this evening that were able to log in. We appreciate your time and effort, and I hope that this webinar has been an eye-opener to be able to help you to manage bullying and toxic work environments. We wish you an amazing World Mental Health Day tomorrow, where we are prioritizing mental health at the workspace. If you are logging in from Kenya, tomorrow is also a holiday. So I will also wish you a happy Mazingira Day. I hope you get to plant a tree somewhere and also show kindness to everybody that you will interact with. From me, it is a goodbye, good night, and enjoy your holiday tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.